Hello, my friends, dear gentle listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Desire Dialogues. I'm really excited today for our guest, and I'm sure you're going to love her too. I want you to meet Nancy Schenker. She's a formal C level executive and business founder. She's also an award winning writer, professional speaker, occasional stand up comic, mother, and grandmother. Nancy is a self proclaimed rule breaker and OG of technology. She's currently 68 years old, and she says, I'm just getting started. Welcome, Nancy. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me as a guest, Lauren. I'm honored.
Oh, so honor is mine. So I love having candid conversations and asking interesting questions about, whatever you're comfortable with sharing with us. Let's start off with an easy question. What was sex ed like for you growing up?
Well, sex ed began at home. My father was an obstetrician and gynecologist. He used to vanish in the middle of the night. And I think as a result of that, my mother was kind of obligated to tell me what he did for a living. I grew up with two brothers, but grew up referring to my vagina as my poo, which is kind of odd coming from a medical family. And I don't even remember what my brother's penises were called. But by the time I got to school, I don't think sex ed was even offered until maybe high school, but I knew stuff about sex. I knew the clinical part of sex from my father. My mother had a very romanticized view of sex. She was a virgin when she got married. Um, and so it was a kind of a mixed bag. I thought I knew how the parts worked and what they did, but I was a voracious reader. And I still have a couple books that I took from my mother's house that had sex scenes in them. And that was like my first like real understanding of P and V sex. But I always felt like it was a little dirty, naughty, not something to be talked about. Keep in mind that I was born in 1956, so it was a very, very different era. It was before the sexual revolution.
Absolutely. And the fact that you mentioned that the body parts weren't called penis and vagina, even in a medical household, it shows how far we've come, but also the shame that was always put on these body parts. We couldn't call them for what there was, and it came off as dirty. And I
Oh yeah.
absolutely love the book part. Oh my gosh. Do you remember what the book was called?
Um, Something, it was 1970s. There were two books. There was Marjorie Morningstar, which was later made into a movie with Natalie Wood about a simple girl who goes to the big city and has sex for the first time. And then the other book was more about like this rock musician, and they referred to sex as bawling. And but it was very, at the time, very provocative. And then, obviously there were movies with innuendo, like not like overt sex scenes.
Mhm.
But it all seemed very kind of mysterious and titillating, but also very enticing to me at the same time. It's like, oh, this looks like fun. Like, this is exciting. I can't wait to be old enough to do this. But at the same time, there was tremendous shame around what I was doing. I remember there's a girl next door who was a little older than I was, who had a fascination with watching me pee and poop, and like
Hmm.
literally put her head like between my legs, like in near the toilet. And I knew that I was doing something freaky. Never told my
Yes,
parents, of course.
that
But
is an absolute fetish for sure. That
yeah,
is
I
so
always often
fun.
wonder like what became of her. I Googled her, but she had a pretty common name. But yeah, and back in that era, there was always like a lot of the 1960s, a lot of whispered stuff. And
Mm.
I think I told you this story that my mother once took me to a James Bond movie and referred to the women in the Yiddish term for slut. She would call them bummas because they weren't married and they were having sex with Sean Connery. And I remember sitting there going, well, that doesn't seem so bad to me. Like, what's wrong and dirty about this? You know, and even in high school, again, it was a very, very different era that, you know, the girls who lost their virginity didn't talk openly about it because we were still slut shamed.
Yeah. And that leads right into my next question. Do you think society's views on sex are becoming more open? Or do we still have some work to do?
Oh, I think there's still a tremendous amount of work to do. I think that puritanical mores are still kind of pervasive, and you get a lot of tittering and giggling around some of these topics, which is one of the reasons why I'm on your podcast, you're on my podcast. I think we just really need to normalize some of this stuff and, make it as talked about scientifically and emotionally as we talk about math and science in the schools, because it is a part of life.
And it absolutely is. And it evolves over time, but it really is hatched from what we're learning about, what our parents are telling us about it, what the view in school is. So that leads to my next question. How has your perspective on sex evolved over time?
I think that, when I was married, it's still, it was, we didn't really talk about it a lot. It was still kind of taboo when I've been divorced now for 12 years. And I think that that has been, not literally coming out as in being gay because I'm hetero, but, I think as I've gotten older and more confident and more comfortable, I've become, um, less fearful of talking about sex openly and honestly. And, you know, reading statistics and reading about the history of sex and, a lot of what's even going on in our world, where, monogamy is kind of up for grabs, pun intended. I just think that we need to just be having healthier dialogues around our bodies. The same way, people talk about dental decay, it's a body part like any other body part. So let's just normalize it.
I'm with you. I love the normalization. I hope to continue, me and you, and with our podcasts. Everybody, Nancy has a podcast called Age Blind, and it is fantastic. And you're gonna have to go listen to it on your own. And we want to bring sex right to the forefront and talk about it a bit more. So,
And also knowing your own style and your own
Mhm.
philosophies. Like, what I often say to men these days is that my brain, my heart, and my vagina are hardwired together. And although I may have gone through phases where, I could have sex without any kind of emotional commitment or hoping for that phone call the next day, like I'm not that person anymore. And so it's got to be the whole body experience for me to really enjoy it.
Wow. Okay. So I see how that love and intimacy and those three things pre-wired together kind of evolved over time for you. That is interesting. I like it.
Yeah, especially as we age, the whole idea of a one night stand, like it's not really what I want. Like, what if I had a stroke? Like, and this person has like no connection to me. In fact, it was funny. I was out on a date and it wasn't even like anything sexual or intimate. And I tripped and fell off a curb because I'm a klutz. And I was bleeding, and this guy could not drop me off fast enough because he didn't want any kind of responsibility, connection. And I do see that a lot, especially people who've been through long-term marriages. They don't want any of the stuff that comes along with a commitment. Whereas I find I don't want like anybody like breathing down my neck, leaving the toilet seat up, leaving a glass on my kitchen counter, um, become a harsh grader. But on the other, I want something in between, with certain level of freedom, but not like being with a guy who's like banging a new woman every 48 hours.
And I love that. I love how that has evolved for you to you find this little like happy middle medium and you're making it work for what you want in your life. And I love that I think that with your age, honestly, just how you are, you're just so free and you're not afraid to say what you want. And you have a very healthy communication style, in my opinion.
Thank
And
you. It only took 68 years. So hopefully conversations like this will shorten the time frame for our listeners and our viewers, that you don't have to wait 68 years as a woman to become comfortable asking for what you want. And I remember there was one incident where I gave feedback and the guy went nuts on me, not like didn't beat me or anything, but said, nobody's ever complained before. It's like, going to return, a can of peas at this grocery store and saying, we've sold thousands of these. I'm like, yeah, but this one, the can is dented. Like, that may have been your experience, but like it's just not doing it for me. Because every woman is, and I can't speak to men because I've never been one, but every woman is wired so differently and has different nerve endings. And some people have pain when they go to the dentist. I slept through a root canal. Like, we all are built differently. And it's not like, one size fits all, literally and figuratively.
absolutely. That's an incredible point, and I hope more people arrive to realizing that it's not, a criticism when you go to give feedback. So, my next question is, when it comes to communication for, a healthy sex life, regardless of the relationship status, how do you approach difficult conversations around sex?
Well, I guess my philosophy is, as you're getting closer to intimacy with somebody, it's good to kind of sprinkle it into the conversation so that the first conversation you're having about sex isn't when you're naked and mid act, whatever that act might be, but to kind of give the other person an inkling of what your style might be, what your preferences are. And then, it does, especially as women, it takes a lot of courage, but you just have to put yourself in that headset and pretend, all right, I'm in a restaurant and somebody wants me to taste their lamb chop. And I don't like lamb chops. Like, you would say, like, no, thank you. I'm just really not a big fan of lamb. Um, or I'm allergic to gluten, I'm celiac, so don't stick that bread in my mouth. Is And you have to do it with a sense of humor. And if you're with somebody who has a fragile ego, which many people do, men and women, it's really approaching it from a place of love and concern and saying, I really, this is all great, this is really feeling terrific, but it might feel better, a little better for me. Make it about you as opposed to about them.
Absolutely. And when you have learned to speak about your desires, just like, lamb chops, has that boosted your confidence overall, like sexually? Because you're smiling so confident right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's always easier to talk about something than it is to actually put it into practice. But,
Mm.
with practice comes perfection. And, I don't wish any of our listeners ever find themselves in a dangerous situation where if you criticize the wrong person, it could end badly. So you also really have to read the room and say, is this someone who's confident enough and invested enough in the relationship that I can be honest with them without my bruising their ego for all eternity.
That's extremely important to take into
And it's a
consideration.
two-way street to ask the other
Yeah.
person, what do you like? What feels good for you? So that it's not a one-way street.
Yeah, absolutely. That is incredible advice. So, Nancy, what's your take on modern dating trends like hookup culture, dating apps? What you thinking
Uh,
about that?
um, the dating apps are great in that it exposes us to a market, not to sound overly clinical, but a group of people that we wouldn't otherwise get to meet. Like, I'm a big fan of long distance dating, destination dating, because I don't know where my person is. And it's a big country. I don't need to be dating somebody who's within a 30-mile radius. But that's just me. Like some people want something different from what I want. I think that it has become very transactional, that people say, all right, if someone says something wrong or does something I don't like, I'm just going to keep swiping. And it allows us to do a lot of comparative shopping and say,
Mm,
oh, well, yeah, and you would never do it in real life. I would never be out on a date with somebody and then get up to go to the ladies' room to see who was sitting at the bar because maybe there was somebody better than the person I was with. But it does create this revolving door of humanity. Um, you have to really know what it is that you're looking for. I actually have a book coming out in February called My Musts, which is a process for really honing in on what you're looking for. And then the second book in this series is going to be, once you've done that, how do you then go about finding them? But obviously, I mean, I've gotten better at online dating the longer I've been doing it. Um, I've made some great friends over the years. I've had some great relationships. Um, am I still holding out for that next big romantic love? That would be a wonderful thing. I was married 27 years, and I think there might be another person for me out there, but if there's not, there's not. And I would rather die alone than with somebody who doesn't bring me joy.
absolutely. That's a that's a very big deal. A lot of people stay in relationships just so they don't have to be alone. And you're just really holding this incredible individuality. You're holding it, you're owning it, and I hope you find what you're looking
Yeah,
for.
and
And I
don't get me
advise
wrong,
you.
the 27 years, most of them were great, and we have two
Yeah,
amazing children, and we built a great life together. And that's the other topic that nobody is really addressing, is that as the population ages and the average life expectancy is 87 for women and 84 for men, and we have more centenarians than ever before, does the old construct of marriage and being with one person for your entire life from age 25 or 27 to 100, is that still viable? Like cars don't last that long, planes don't last that long. Like marriage has a 50% success rate. So we need to start looking at that, very honestly and scientifically, and say, if anything had a 50%, if airlines had a 50% fail rate, would you get on that plane? Probably not.
that's the thing. We're used to hearing about one thing, and then now it's starting to get a bit outdated. That idea of like this one person for your whole life. And it's not for everybody. And we see a rise in ethical non-monogamy and polyamory and open relationships and swingers. And they seem to have really healthy, well versed and different varieties of pleasure that, fulfill that cup. And that's a very cool conversation to get into. And we have this longer life expectancy now. And from 25 till the end, that's a lot to give one person, and that's a
It's
lot. That's a
assumed
big
that it assumes you're
conversation.
evolving at exactly the same rate.
Absolutely. How can you evolve next to somebody and hope you keep hitting these growth spurts together? And will it always match up?
Yeah, and
Or
I've
will
heard
you
of couples
outgrow?
that have gotten divorced and then gotten back together 10 years later after they've done the work and really, reimagine themselves. And I think that's a real possibility too for many people.
I really like that. There's a lot that we can learn in a relationship, and then there's a lot we can learn about ourselves outside of a relationship. That's a really big deal. Yeah, that could
Especially
be a
my generation of women, because we have had a lot of responsibility. In the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of pressure for us to become executives and not be moms. And, so
yeah.
then we spent our formative years taking care of our coworkers and our employees and our kids and our spouses and the household. And then our parents aged. And in my case, I was partially responsible for the care of my aging mother. And so this is really the first era in my life where I'm not being told what to do by anybody, which is both scary and liberating at the same time.
Oh, I can only imagine. I can only imagine. And it's a big deal because the role, air quotes here, the role of a woman has changed quite a lot over the decades. And you're able to be so much more than the box that once was for you to
Right.
be.
Literally and figuratively. And that box can start to dry up and the walls can thin out and you just need to, the same way men, are seeking help for ED, women who want to remain sexually active into their 50s, 60s and beyond have to find the right solutions and medications to keep themselves, as youthful as is humanly possible sexually.
Absolutely. And I hope more people do, because your sex life stuff does not need to end at menopause. There is no cutoff date. And so, does sex get better as you age, Nancy?
I think it really depends on the person and it depends on
Mhm.
the partner. Um, you could have great sex or lousy sex in your 20s and great sex or lousy sex in your 60s. Like it's really all about communication, it's about pheromones, it's about a number of factors.
It really is. And also possibly the openness and the willingness of to how much you're able to and want to learn about your body and new things to experience. Not everybody needs that or wants that, you know?
Yeah, and I think that what a lot of people are facing now because of the dating apps, back to your earlier question, is, are you okay with a partner who has multiple other partners? And some people are, and some people aren't. And it's so much easier now. In the old days, it was like called cheating, and now it's, E&M and polyamory and swinging. And you may think you're fine with something, but then when put to the test, you're really not fine with it. So you just have to really know your boundaries, know what turns you on, literally and figuratively. And it makes me sad when I see women who don't really feel comfortable with open relationships or E&M and kind of go along with it because they don't want to lose their man. Um, and I don't know if it works on the other side. Again, I can only speak for one gender, but that makes me sad that older women say, well, you know, if I'm going to keep this guy, I have to let him do what he wants to do, or this is just the way men are. They're always going to, their animals are always going to be seeking multiple partners, but they don't have to. It doesn't have to be that way. And, you know, as liberal and as open as I am, I'm a little bit of a germaphobe and I have high standards. And there's kind of an ick factor that I don't want somebody putting his penis in me who's has it in 10 other women, no matter how safe it is. Like it feels disrespectful to me. And again, that's just me.
And it is, and it's also personal. It's also what are the boundaries to you, how far out can you walk before you get the ick, right?
Right.
It's giant topics. We have hit so many incredibly juicy topics, but I got a little bit of time left. I have one more question for you.
Sure.
And then I'd love after that for you to share how my audience can keep in touch with you because obviously they do. You're awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Last question. What decade of your life has been the best and sexually fulfilling?
Ah, well, that's two different questions. What period of my life? My best period of my life is actually now.
Yeah.
I'm super proud of my two grown daughters. I've had a terrific career. I had a great marriage, long, really long run with somebody who I deeply, deeply loved, and we grew up together. There have been so many wonderful things throughout my life that have brought me to this point. Sexually fulfilling, it's really changes based on the era. And I probably haven't even hit my stride yet. So for any guys who are listening, think who want to date me, like hit me up. You never know.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think my audience is about 50% men, actually, which is really neat. I love that. Everyone tunes in to learn more. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly, exactly.
All right. So if anybody wants to hit up Nancy, she hasn't hit her stride yet. So you guys can have some powerful stuff happening. Nancy, tell our listeners how to keep in touch with you.
Well, I'm in the process of separating my business brand from my personal brand. So when is this going to air, Lauren?
When would you like it to air?
Well, if it airs after February 10th, you
Okay.
can find me at NancyAF, which is my personal brand website. My business brand is the OnSwitch, TheonSwitch, which I will continue to keep alive and well for my work purposes, but I'm going to have a work brand and a play brand. So follow me on both, follow me on one or the other, follow me on neither, but follow me somewhere. That'd be very cool.
Absolutely. And I will link those down in the show notes for you guys. And I'm going to wait until that Nancy AF brand is up and going. So this will be around
Thank you.
February when it first comes out. So you got that nice new brand that they can go visit you at.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. You're terrific. And yeah, as you said, my podcast is called Age Blind, and generations have way more in common than they do dividing us. So that's really key. And I'm still the same person I was when I was 5 years old, but just way wiser and more confident.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for joining us, Nancy. Until next time,
Thank you, Lauren. Take care.
you too. Bye.
Bye.